Today, I'm speaking with an entrepreneur who realized the importance of the niche. John Gillie, the founder of trucktractortrailer.com, is here to chat about the community he has built and how it adds value to the trucking industry. John, thanks for hopping on. I have to ask, how did you come up with building a marketplace for selling trucks of all things?
Wow. Yeah, well, thank you for having me, Mike. So it was probably 8 years ago. Had the idea. Actually, was taking a meeting in New York at Salesforce.com headquarters of all places, and kind of knew a friend there that would, from time to time, let us use his conference room because we were Salesforce clients at the time. So it was just convenient. And we in the meeting there was someone with a stack of truck paper magazines, and truck paper is number one our largest competitor. And but at the time, 8 years ago, they did have an online presence, but mainly, and they still do, they have trucks for sale and trailers for sale, equipment for sale through their magazines. The person I was working with was looking to buy a truck and sell a truck, and I noticed that he had about 4 or 5 of these magazines, and but they were all about 3 months old. And I said, "Well, how's that going for you?" And he goes, "Well, I'm having a tough time. Every time I call to see if a truck is still available, it's sold." And I looked at the dates, and these magazines were 3 to 4 months old. So I said, quickly, another partner of mine said, "Dude, that business is in the cloud." Right? It's like the magazine business is dead. Now we know the magazine and publishing is not dead, but what was true was that in the last 8 years, a lot of that work went online. So the idea for TTT, trucktractortrailer.com, really came out of that moment.
Oh, wow. Did you have some sort of background before in like e-com or like the online world?
Only as the answer is yes. I'm not a coder, not a developer, although, like most people of my generation, we took basic and Cotran and all kinds of programming language. So I'm not a coder. I'm not a typical techie or e-commerce person. But whether I was working for Aramark or working for First Group at the time, we always used our website to get the message out, to sell things. So I was always on the commercial side, either a chief commercial officer or on the executive team that really leveraged our online presence. So the answer is yes and no, right?
Okay.
But never something like trucktractortrailer.com.
Yeah, it's definitely been an interesting market the past few years. Well, past decade, I would say, right? But tell me a bit about where we are in terms of like the state of the industry as a whole,
Yeah.
2026.
So, first of all, the trucking industry, you got to think of it. I think of COVID, if you think about the COVID time, the period, whether it be, the 12 to 18 or 24 months, I think one thing we all learned was, healthcare workers, nurses, doctors are the heroes. But right up there also were the truckers, the owner operators, the fleets who were delivering, keeping the economy going, keeping us fed, keeping, all the distribution warehouse. So trucking is essential. It's an essential workforce. So let's think about that. But the immediate trucking economy has been really tested with the Trump tariffs that were really early 25. So April, if you look at April 5th as the time when the reciprocal tariffs went into effect, there is almost like the dimmer switch started going down on what was really going to be a robust. The first quarter 25 was on fire for trucking and logistics and transportation. But once those reciprocal tariffs was implemented, it's the negative of the positive intent, right? The dimmer switch started to happen. But then as we came into the summer months, and then November, I think November 1st, the truck tariffs were implemented, where I think the president was attempting to not only, this will speak to your consumer auto group, because they've followed they've experienced the same pain that we did in trucking last year. There was a forced attempt to bring trucking and automotive manufacturing back to the United States. Well, you can imagine, whether it's tires or components or whatever you're selling or making parts and components in the consumer auto or trucking world, you just can't flip the switch, and that those things can't happen overnight. Well, so the dimmer switch really turned off the lights and for trucking in November, December. And it started to trickle down to the owner operators. We're really, really stressed. Now, what we're starting to see, and to answer your question, the economy is now starting to settle a little bit. I think that's true, and also consumer auto, because I follow consumer auto fairly closely. It's a leading indicator to trucking. Trucking's a lagging to consumer in some ways. So there's green shoots. Things are improving.
Things are improving. Is
Yeah.
that you basically okay?
Yeah, but only in the last 4 to 6 weeks.
Oh, why is that? Why is that you think? Just new money injected from the new year that was
I think it's the promise of lower interest rates,
okay.
loosening of credit, because, and I think your consumer will also experience that same factor. But owner operators, small fleets, are really dependent. They have to, they usually buy used trucks, tractors, and trailers, right?
Yeah.
That's our customer. We have probably 200,000 plus members of our community, the TTT community. So we are in itself a pretty good litmus test to the overall market. We have a meaningful market share of followers and people in our community. But what we're finding is that credit is loosening up, and also insurance is loosening up. And so I think it's settling. It's not over
Okay.
yet, because some of the tariffs, I think even this morning,
Greenland.
President Trump talked about out of the Greenland thing. That's going to disrupt a lot of product that's coming in from Europe, but also Mexico, Canada, which is where a lot of your truck components are manufactured, right? Yeah.
Yeah. You touched on your community in terms of what it comprises, owner operator versus how do you define that versus like a fleet? What would you say your community is built of, if you could, I guess, weight it a little bit?
Yeah, so we are trucktractortrailer.com is a two-sided marketplace
Okay.
of sellers and buyers. Think about Carvana, right? I think that's probably the best use case. Although we're not a registered dealer, we are facilitators of the trade. So we're dealing with our sellers are typically the larger fleets and carriers, because they traditionally buy new. And then after 3 years, after the lease or after the useful life of a 2 or 3 year old truck or trailer, they then start to liquidate that asset. And the buyers of the used assets are your owner operators and small fleets. Now, the makeup of the trucking community, not just the TTT community, but overall trucking, is predominantly by owner operators. There's over 1 million owner operators. These are individual driver or family that owns a single truck or maybe 2 trucks. Another large segment of the market are your small fleets, anywhere from 5 units to 50 units. So while we're all on the interstates and driving, right, and we see the tractors pulling the trailers, there's a great chance that is a individual owner operator or small fleet that is hauling that load, not so much a large fleet. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Very fragmented.
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. So, fun question. I was thinking about before. Has your platform yet? I don't even know if it exists yet in the real world, but have we sold an EV truck yet on TTT?
It's interesting. We have them listed for sale
Oh, really?
all the time. Yeah. So we are very, our group, we also have a consulting practice. We called Power, TTT Power. we have done business in the EV world because we're connected to the market. We've consulted with the state of California. CalStart was a client for a pretty lengthy time. Lion Electric, which was coming out of Quebec, we helped to launch Lion in the States. They've since had, like most EV companies, have struggled and are now just focused on Canada. But for about 5 years, they were a client. We also, out of our group, started a EV company called Green Island EV. So we had aspirations to be an EV OEM. So it's interesting you asked that question. So, what's really interesting is that the promise of EV, and there's a gravitational pull thanks to Tesla, and then you have Rivian, you have, all the other, Boyd, BYD coming out of China. The promise of EV is certainly for trucking is certainly there. However, I think with the current administration, that is no longer providing incentives for EVs, that is going to, I was going to say, slow the transition from diesel to EV or clean energy, moving from fossil to clean. But actually, it's going to kill it. Right? It's going to stop it because, one of the interesting things, Mike, that people outside the business may not know is there's never been an EV, electric vehicle, consumer or commercial, sold without some level of tax incentive.
Sure.
Right. And if you take away those tax incentives and grants, you pretty much kill an industry that was 100% dependent. No one's ever bought a Tesla without some tax incentive. Not even in some states, not even a single unit.
Oh, wow. I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I know it was one Friday night not too long ago. I saw the F-150 was canceled, the electric platform, and I said,
Yeah.
"Wow, is this a big time right now for EV in terms of like a total shift of
Yeah.
maybe the expectations, right? I think they I don't know, the mass media made it sound like we're going to be all EV in 10 years, but now it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case."
Well, I think in 6 key states, in mostly Democratic states, right, D's and R's, and I think the D states like New York and California, I think 50% of all Teslas in the world are sold in California. I don't know if that's 100% accurate, but you go to California, those, I would call them early adopters. Same thing with the trucking industry. And also the school bus business, which I was in for a while. I think the adoption of EV is going to definitely slow because of the lack of tax incentives. Yeah.
So in terms of cost, looking at your average user on your website, what's like the biggest mistake you see them when maybe buying a truck?
Mm.
Maybe looking short term versus long term.
So for a buyer, an owner operator, or a small fleet, I think it's a false choice to think that you have to go alone, right? There's a false choice that you have to go to the dealership on your own to negotiate on your behalf. And it's one of the use cases for TTT, for trucktractortrailer.com. One of the benefits is we don't charge a buyer, whether it's an owner operator or a small fleet, to help represent them at the table.
Oh,
Right?
really?
No, this is the part of the greatest value that we bring, and certainly why we're, I would say, embedded or aligned with some of the big the trucker associations like OOIDA, that has 152,000 members, mostly owner operators. It's the owner operator independent driver association. So, we provide that level of service where a buyer comes into us, they create a wish list of, here's the 5 trucks I'm looking for, or 5 trailers I'm looking for. Our team goes hunting in the market for those units, and it's a way for the buyer to, to partner with someone that's looking out on their behalf. Think about it as real estate. Typically you're not going to want to buy a home without a real estate agent or an inspection of that house. Certainly you want representation. Same thing with TTT. Although we're not a registered dealer, we do provide a lot of buy side, you know, advisory. Yeah.
Is there like when you buy a boat, you do something called like an inspection, a haul out? Is there something in trucking where you do some sort of a survey?
Not just a survey, but definitely a vehicle inspection.
Okay.
And we have probably 7 different partners that we work with that, again, the buyer request an inspection, but also on the sell side, I think the major fleets and carriers, it's called fleet ready. They're constantly under the radar um, from the DOT, the state DOT, Department of Transportation, to keep those fleets well maintained. But at that point of sale, certainly as a buyer, you're probably going to want to make an investment to hire a certified technician to go out there and check out this truck. It's not unlike consumer in a lot of ways. You, of course, you want to, do business with people you trust, but you want to verify what you're buying.
Sure.
And there's a lot of yeah. So I would never buy a truck, a tractor, or a trailer without an inspection.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
So jumping into maybe the back to the state of the industry, one thing that I always joke about of the tire industry is like it'll always be here. So from a
yeah,
recruiting standpoint, you said last year the tariffs made put a dimmer on the direction for us in recruiting. It was more like shutting off the faucet, but
yeah,
we're
yeah.
a very resilient industry in the tire and automotive, and there will always be a place for us. So how do you think of that in terms of trucking? Do you see it the same way that really there's just always going to be this necessity, and that's what makes it such a beautiful industry to operate in, and really what excites you about TTT?
Yeah, I would say in my lifetime, certainly, and in my boys, my sons' lifetime, the truck and transportation distribution world will exist pretty closely to what it is now. I think what's going to change and what's going to drive change is um, more efficiency, right? Like certainly everything on the ground is expensive. Everything in the cloud is cheap in comparison, cheaper, better, faster. So, TTT, we have certain levels of AI, artificial intelligence, built in to our platform to help guide both the seller and the buyer to self-serve. Not unlike shopping on Amazon or Zillow, or I know this is being broadcast live on LinkedIn. you know um, there's a lot of things that people want control of. So I think that if there's certain areas that are going to change about the trucking community, it's going to be the adoption of technology to help you run your fleet, whether it's a fleet of one or 5,000, more efficiently. So it's the adoption of technology. I think that's what's going to change. Also, you have a lot of talk about autonomous, not just autonomous consumer autos. And again, the trucking communities lags consumer by 5 to 7 years.
Okay.
So everything that's happening in consumer will eventually impact trucking. Now, do we think that we're going to have autonomous trucks on the road in 2026? They're already on the road, right? They're being tested. They're being in micro markets. They're definitely being they're building a use case for it. Where we're probably 3 to 5 years away from true autonomy in commercial trucking. And also, it's going to go by segment. You have the last mile delivery. You mentioned the Ford 150. It's not, the Ford 150 is the largest selling work truck in the market. People
Yeah.
don't realize that, but it is because of that last mile delivery, and also a lot of your technicians, plumbers, electricians, workers in the oil fields, they use that F-150. So those are the ones that are going to adopt first as far as autonomy. But I would say the answer to your question is that the trucking industry will remain, but it's going to look I think, a lot different. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, John, I appreciate you sharing your insights this morning and introducing meet a TTT. Pretty awesome what you've built. Congratulations on your
Thank
first
you.
10 years and
Yeah.
looking forward to what you build over the next decade. If someone does want to reach out to you or interested in anything, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Well, certainly, you can go to trucktractortrailer.com. All of my contact information is there. My team's contact information is there. And while you're there, please check it out. I think you'll be pleased in what you see and a little surprised that the trucking industry is so far advanced. Again, it's a very competitive market, a very professional market. These are, whether an owner operator or a small fleet, these are entrepreneurs that we're serving, right? So that's the best way to get a hold of us. Also, for you, Mike, you and I were talking earlier about talent. We're always looking for, top talent to join our team. So please, reach out either to Mike or myself, and we'd love to talk with you.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, John, for jumping on this morning and looking forward to seeing you on LinkedIn.
All right, thanks, Mike. Thank you so much.
Bye bye.